also get rid of this big air compressor. And the other item we have, you're typically going to have problems with pneumatic controls is your lines start to leak over time. You can't find where you're losing air. And so your compressor just cycles and cycles and cycles and uses even more. And worse yet, you might lose control in a section of the building. It's really, really outdated technology. It's from the 80s. I mean, pneumatics were big in the 80s. We really haven't been installing pneumatic controls since 1990. It's all gone electronic now. So this is some really, really old technology that I think would be very beneficial to the district to be able to convert this over to a computerized system that you can actually see what's happening on your head-end equipment. You can diagnose problems very, very quickly and not waste a lot of time chasing down a problem that could be anywhere in the miles of pipes that run through the facility. So a lot of advantages from energy and also from maintenance perspective. So I don't know.
Anything you
Kelly
want
wants
to
to add
add?
anything to that?
The only thing I had is the potential consideration of the other locations with pneumatics. West Rock Hill Elementary, I believe at least 6 times in the last year we've had major pneumatic air leaks like you spoke to, that runs your compressor longer, lose control of certain areas, and also North Middle School. But if this is just the high school, it's a good place to start.
Thank you.
You have centralized control with this system, whereas you only have localized control with pneumatic too, so he's got control that on the actual site, not the property.
It's only main plan.
That help with making the climate in the school?
Absolutely.
Look at kids talking about it, and it's freezing.
Yes, and that's a symptom of pneumatic controls is it does not have a good ability to control temperature. So you find the room temperature going much more like this rather than just a little bit up. In a DEC system, you watch it, we'll put a logger in there, and the data logger, it'll just go up and down just a little bit as the system cycle. Pneumatics, you can tell, because the temperature's going like this, and they're just not that high.
It depends heavily too on the system, so it would depend on the facility, because sometimes it depends how the air is being dispersed across the room, the type of air conditioning you have, as well as ventilators. This can improve that as far as giving you better control.
So, like, if you go in this stairwell right here, it's hot. Like, and then the rest of the space out here is conditioned. Will it fix that problem or no?
That may not be the other system. That's-
There's just nothing there.
It's not what it says.
It's like a greenhouse. It's
Exactly. Walk outside and walk out inside.
So the only
There's a lot of solar here.
And the only other thing that I agree, I'm going to ask you to repeat, because I believe I heard you say it as well, but I want to say it out loud from a public standpoint, because you've now been in all of the buildings.
That's great.
And one of the things we asked you to do was to look to see whether there were priority items that had to be slated, or at least your recommendation is to slate them into summer 2020. What I think I heard you say is that you are comfortable enough with your evaluations that there aren't those items because the buildings are in good stead and have been cared for, and there aren't surprises. You didn't walk in and go, oh my gosh, those windows they need to go to the roof, those types of things. That we didn't have to add any of those emergency safety items, any of those to the buildings.
I would characterize it, there's no red alerts. There might be some cautions, but
Excellent.
there's no red alerts.
There's maintenance items, but nothing that can't wait until next summer, I guess is our point. And to Kelly's point, the one that would stand out would be the chiller.
Yes.
So if we were to identify that, what is that item? It's the chiller itself.
Thank you.
So Mark, you want to talk about the side track position? Yeah, that's the green button.
I can stand up. I can't.
Just some new people. You just want to introduce yourself again, Mark?
Sure. Mark Karowski with KW. We're site designers, civil engineers, landscape architects, land surveyors, so we're everything outside the building. Tonight, wanted to just kind of run through a little discussion on, so we had a lot of good conversation and feedback from the district on talking predominantly about parking on the high school, high school and middle school campus. So this is just, again, oriented, this is just existing conditions. And talking through it was pretty clear where some of the pain points are for parking right now on campus. So we've got these on 11 by 17s, if that's helpful, if you can't see it from a distance, we can pass them around. So we have an overall, and then we've got blown up enlarged views of each of the areas where we're talking about the possibility of expanding the existing parking or providing new parking facilities. So kind of while those are coming around, just to get oriented, so we've looked at kind of 5, really 6 major areas of potential parking improvements. The way that they're kind of numbered as we walk through the list. Can you all see the green marks? I can't see them.
Sorry, I can't see it either.
So they're numbered 1 through 6, and they kind of start here in the middle, and we go counterclockwise. So the first one, which we had very initially laid out, was thinking, hey, we looked at expanding right here in kind of the central part of campus. Mostly because we thought it was central, it was proximate to the stadium, it was proximate to both buildings. Talking through it, the thought was maybe that's not the highest and best location, but it lends itself very well from the perspective that it's relatively flat. It's close to the middle. We can pick up roughly 109 new parking spaces. Recall that there is an existing maintenance building located in this area just below the tennis courts. And talking through that discussion, there's been some conversation about whether that's the right location for that building. So should that choose to move, now we do really open up some fairly easy, from kind of an grading perspective, place to pick up some spaces. Again, basically at the bottom of the slope below the tennis court, and then some head-in spaces over here towards the middle school. Cycling here around counterclockwise, this is kind of the bigger area we wanted to chat through. This came through loud and clear as we were talking about student parking. So the problem is lot 2. We do have some green space up here. There is some athletic field play space use up there, but kind of try to keep it tucked down as close as possible to the existing lot. Some of the thought there too is A, student parking most likely. B, it lets us kind of maybe drive some of that traffic out here on kind of the southwest side of campus instead of having everything come in this direction. There's a circulation discussion we still need to have coming out of wherever we think all the parking improvements want to end up. But this picks up quite a few spaces. There are 150 parking spaces in that lot. This would be one of the more challenging spots in terms of grade. We know that we have to deal with some grade up there, probably need stairs. I think we can get away from retaining walls, but definitely some stairs and a little bit of maybe some slopey driveways. But it does pick up quite a few parking spaces, and it would look very natural in terms of expanding what's already in that location. Then you're working again now counterclockwise down here in the corner, what we're calling lot 3. Not my favoriteest of all the options, but we wanted to look at it because it is flat space. It's actually at the top of the slope that comes up from this lower area, so there's not a lot of dirt work there. Again, relatively flat. We can pick up about 50 spaces in that area. It's a little far from the building. You've got connectivity potentially down here to sidewalks, but it's kind of a decent walk in either direction, but it's really any further than these, and it's part of a student wellness program. So,
I was gonna say.
That's
bad.
Well, I can tell you, I've heard from students that, that can't do this anymore, but used to park over at Giant and prefer to walk over to Giant because they could get out faster.
yes.
So I'm sure they wouldn't mind walking to this parking
Well,
lot.
it's either this or take bus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great point of view. Like, so water seats its own level. So once you build these things, people figure out how can I get in or out of campus quickest. We talked about, hey, do we change where students and staff park? To me, no issue with having students walk some distance to get to the building. I don't really think that's a real issue. It's not that far away. It's just making sure the connectivity would probably be down here, but we could certainly get them up to that level as well.
Now, so you said this is a relatively flat area. Is it a wet area though? Are you worried about drainage?
When I walked the campus, I really didn't notice anything in that area. I think we have enough grade to work with that we can provide proper slope to make sure that it does drain properly.
Okay.
So now let's kind of cycle over to the far right of the drawing, and there's a couple of things happening here, kind of behind the middle school and in the bus facility area.
There is a slide in here with just 4, 5, and 6. if you want to do that.
Good call. It's like you do this. Okay. So now again, we're zoomed in on the far right, so we're really the majority of what we're seeing here is the middle school, here's the bus facility. So kind of a couple of things happen here. So we understand it, you can kind of see it in the area underneath here is what was, I think initially intended to be passenger vehicle parking has now been converted essentially to some of the smaller van and bus parking. So we've lost some of that parking for staff. So one of the things we looked at was, can we take those spaces, recreate them here, which has a continuity with where you have the majority of the buses parked at the top of the lot. We've striped them as bus spaces, meaning, well, we could run buses, flip them, take some of the buses out here to move some of the smaller equipment in here. Either way, it provides about 36 spaces plus 5 or 6 for the smaller vans and buses. I think this picks up about 45 passenger vehicle spaces. So you still may have a couple of the buses, we couldn't capture all of these unless we keep pushing this lot. We could, there's some room. The obvious impact here is, I think it's ninth grade baseball that uses that field, correct? So it works well in the sense that it is right here by the bus facility. This is flat ground. This relates well to this parking lot. From a construction standpoint, it's fairly cost-effective construction.
Which part, the rectangle or the triangle?
This piece.
Okay.
So this is really no construction. This is just moving the vehicles out of here and reclaiming those spaces for passenger vehicles. So nominal cost other than maybe we have to restripe. I don't even think we have to do that. So this is probably little to no cost. This is new construction, dirt work, and paving and storm drainage. Obviously, you lose the ninth grade baseball field, so you have to find a home for that. This one, so this actually does sit at the top of the hill as well. So this triangular piece is kind of the outfield, the left field of the ninth grade baseball field. It's at the top of the rise here behind the middle school. Not the efficientest parking layout, but it does pick up quite a few spaces close to both. Whether, I don't know that it's realistic to expect middle school staff to come down here. I don't, other than either, you could have middle school staff, we could get path down here. Certainly, for the bus facility, that would be very proximate to that building. It also then serves athletic facilities up in this area if there's that need, and that's not there for right now. I'll touch on that later. So we're showing all of these not to say, hey, we should build all of these. It's to say, if we build in these pockets, we can pick up this many spaces, in my mind. So I've got my little cheat sheet here. All of these notes are listed in our presentation. We can sort of provide them that say, hey, each of these lots pick up X number of spaces. So kind of the cumulative impact, if we said, yep, let's do it, let's build them all, we pick up just over 400 total parking spaces campus-wide. Our count on existing spaces is somewhere around 950. So you're talking about 40% of the parking. I think there's a conversation here about prioritization. Which ones do we really think function the best? Which ones have the most cost-effective construction value? Honestly, most of these, the student lot, which is probably where we want the most spaces, will be the most challenging to construct just because of grade, but it'll work. The other ones are all on relatively flat ground.
Can you explain why the weird shape at the bottom? Like, why couldn't we
Yes.
just make 2 rectangles next to each other and make it a big,
You're talking about kind of do
Yeah.
this, like flip this over and kind of do both.
Well, like, you see the rectangle, if you just did 2 of them, one on top of each other, I guess you can't do that because of the grade?
We can, I mean, you mean down here? No, this is where the slope kind of starts. Sorry, oops, I touched the screen.
Maybe that's right. That's what happens.
So that appears here. And then hit the shares.
So these have to drain
Yes, sir.
or this.
This is history of this whole part. We've had this issue finished.
So no, I actually meant lot 6. If you took lot 6 and then made a second lot 6 right under it. Or lot 4.
You're talking about taking this one and flipping it down.
Yes.
We were just trying to keep them separate from passenger vehicles versus buses.
Okay.
I mean, we could, I think the gist of it is, this is flat space. So if we want to, take this and mirror here, it's just, then you're going to be directing passenger vehicle traffic, whether that is staff, maybe that's not a big deal. If it's bus maintenance staff up here where they're commingling with buses, they're gonna still do it here, but it's a little further away from kind of the majority of the bus activity. Semantics, we can certainly find something. They will work, because we do a fly around.
Is that like that basin large enough for all of the drainage off of lot 4, lot 4 and 6? It looks like 4, 5, and 6 are all, you said they're all gonna have to drain down that lower right basin. Is that basin large enough to handle that amount of drainage?
So, that's a whole design question. What I will say is this, we haven't analyzed that yet, that's, that actually, but Mike, what I would say is it's probably a combination of things. It's either, hey, if we have, so ultimately there would be an analysis that says, okay, here's all the paving we're gonna add. Do we do it in the basins down at the bottom end campus? Maybe we can pick up some there. More likely, and you're seeing more of what they consider like a low impact design, which is more kind of smaller, localized stormwater facility. So we may end up with something in the grass right next to the parking lot. We may have something that's a little bit below grade, but you kind of start to see them really very close to where the improvement's being done. It's actually a bit of the trend, well, it has been the trend in stormwater design for the last 7 or 8 years or so.
But you look at some type of curb size for paving as well.
Oh, I love
We can, although from a maintenance side of things, you're obligating yourself to very regular, you have to basically street sweep them, or do like, you have to, like, you have to back roads, basically. Yeah, we like to do those in areas where you're not seeing heavy vehicular traffic, so if we're doing like pedestrian paths, basketball courts, places where you're not seeing heavy traffic, or you're not seeing oils and, cinders and stuff in the winter. These I probably wouldn't lean that way, but we've got some other tricks.
Okay, so but that all of those things with your design plan will drive those costs up when we start talking about
Yeah, so we would,
stormwater.
exactly, yes, as you're, I'm sure, well aware, stormwater is not getting any easier, it's
No,
actually
yeah,
far more
it's-
complex.
That's, and that's why I asked about pervious, because we have done pervious asphalt for driveways. On my road, we don't have a storm
Yes.
system. They're notorious for sinkholes there. We use a pervious solution to get around that, because we can get really expensive stormwater, fix there, solution there. And so it was cost effective, very cost effective actually for install. And the district, they worked with, when they worked with Hershey Entertainment, who is using that in their parking lots. And they met with the Hershey staff, and said, okay, what is this from a maintenance standpoint? What does this look like? They got comfortable with it, and we ultimately used that as a solution.
Oh, okay, great.
So it is, when it gets into the stormwater conversation, it can be cost efficient, effective, but then it comes down to, does the district accept the maintenance responsibility of that?
Yeah.
The other thing I will say is it can be kind of a learning lab for students, because this is where we're going, the conversation with the flooding that's been occurring, especially when you get out into Houston, things like that, definitely because we're losing our access to pervious surface, water's nowhere to go. So it is kind of cool to tie into a school site for future.
So did you look at the other site, the other property that we have, to look at whether or not it would be cost effective to utilize that space for all of the
For
storage
bus
of all our
parking?
buses?
We have not dug into that site very deeply. I think we wanted to get a sense of, my gut feeling is from a cost standpoint, if this opens up the spaces that you need here and provides parking for staff at the bus garage, and whether or not there's any spillover from that parking lot into the middle school and enough buses, this is certainly gonna be more cost effective, because you're gonna build entirely new out there. We certainly can, if there's hey, we have a different use in mind here that we wanna free all of it up, we can certainly figure out, hey, how can we fit everything up? Certainly the cost to go from new in that location, is gonna exceed. So, a lot of things to throw at you. This was really, we think we've pretty much maximized the areas on the site where it makes the most sense to provide additional parking. I think really our next step is to kind of start to find through some conversation, okay, where do these make the most sense? And this is gonna drive some discussion about circulation. Do we wanna change how traffic circulates through campus? We even talked about, and Dr. Bowman, just before the meeting talked about this, was another access on the Fifth. There's gonna be a lot of conversation about that, because there's so much activity on Fifth with the turn lanes and the doors and all those things. But if we see how we can move traffic around in a way that helps us get on and off campus quicker and still safely, that is something that we would consider.
So I would be looking at trying to optimize the space as much as possible, to get as many parking spots in the space that we have. And I feel like this little loop kind of wastes a lot of space that could be using a lot of parking spots. Yeah, so if you wanted to keep the two lots separate, I mean, couldn't you just have like a median or, you know, what are the things that, you park right behind a little concrete barrier or whatever, for each spot, that, so that the one lot, so that you can't just drive from one into the other, and then there can still be two separate spots that go into each of those lots. But I'm just thinking, you know, if we're going to try to do that, it makes sense to just do a big strip, right?
Sure.
But again, then you would have to look at, we'd have to look at all of the rest of the, grounds as far as, you said, the baseball field and,
Baseball and
those other
softball.
grass fields that are up there, and how you can lay out everything to make sure that you have the space for all the things that you have to do.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a prioritization that comes out of this overall plan that says, hey, where do we think we get the most value for the parking lots that we build, right? Is it better to, you know, maybe here, we don't need this at all. I mean, it could well be, maybe we don't need that, because maybe by doing this, really this, pulling that bus parking out, have we opened up enough passenger vehicles that the bus maintenance facility seems satisfied? I'm not sure, you know, I honestly don't recall if we were feeling like we needed more spaces for middle school staff or middle school parents for certain events. That goes back to the lot that we showed right kind of in the middle. We have like 40 or 50 headed spaces that will be right in front of the middle school. So I think there's kind of a, you know, this is a concept that says, hey, if we needed to pick up parking for, well, let's talk about this. So part of the reason we showed this was if there's a conversation about where a new, whether it's synthetic or not, but if it's a new turf field comes into play, well, maybe this helps to serve that. This then is more of a drop-off. This is saying, well, it may not just be people coming to park, it may be parents coming to pick up kids or drop kids off, so there's a drop-off.
Yeah.
So, sorry, that was kind of the missing piece to that conversation.
So you would be moving the drop-off up there?
You'd be adding one.
That would be.
Just
That's
for
it.
the
Was
school.
this,
Yeah, it's not for the
Was
school.
this particular design put on here to optimize the number of spaces or just conceptual?
Conceptual, basically show kind of order of magnitude, how many we think we could pick up kind of campus-wide.
In the locations that made sense, as we had conversations as a design team. So we did consider, I mean, these locations have all been discussed. And we also discussed other locations that might not be as opportunistic based off of other
And so,
constraints.
I think that the confusion about the design probably did arise from this weird little loop, which, until you look up close, you don't realize, oh, that's where parents will go to drop off the kids, that'll just go, and then they can leave. Does that
right,
make
but we
sense?
don't even, but that's based on the hypothetical field analysis.
Exactly, it's all conceptual.
It doesn't talk about where the baseball field would be or where the other
Right.
fields would be, so it's kind of just an idea. I feel like when we're looking at parking, we're instead worried about a loop for a field that doesn't exist, or.
Unless you put a baseball
And
field
we're not-
there.
You know,
Well, there are
we don't
You
know
could put
where.
different
There are
fields.
fields
So,
there
let me see
right
this.
now.
There are still
Don't get
fields.
married to the configuration of this park.
Okay.
This is purely showing the concept of, we can pick up 55 or 60 parking spaces here, whether those are to serve the turf field. If that doesn't happen, those could be some different configuration if it wants to serve the middle school. Those could be a different configuration if it wants to serve the bus stop. So it's not we're not saying, hey, we gotta build a loop here. We're just saying, if we thought about a turf field,
Purely conceptual.
if we thought that was the right location, we have some pretty proximate parking that would include, because if say that happens, well, you could still park here, but it's not really, I mean, do we care? Maybe we don't care about having the drop off there. Maybe you just park here and people walk, because we're
Right.
pretty close, right? 'Cause we got walk.
Right now, anyone who's accessing any of those fields there just comes up from that parking lot, and I don't know that you would want to steer people around to over there, even if you did put that field there. So I would be looking at, our biggest issue with parking is students having enough parking and there being enough exits at the end of the school day. So that's really the priority as far as adding the extra space, because that's where the biggest daily
conversation or sooner, absolutely. I think for the bigger conversation that we're having, keeping in mind that there's a significant amount of money budgeted in that Dewey study for 2020 to regrade athletic fields that are otherwise, rendered unusable during certain times of the year. So we do have to still answer that conversation, and that's what we're looking at for the study grounds. What is the most economic way to address those needs? And does a lot like that, even with some type of drop off, help push traffic congestion to that side of the site, just to access those fields, regardless of whether they're grass or synthetic turf or whatever we're looking at as a solution to help separate the traffic flow after hours.
Right. And I think as far as the field issue is concerned, we're gonna have to try to come up with a long-term plan of where are all of those, where is the baseball field going to go, where are those additional grass fields, like, everything needs to be laid out so that we make sure that nothing is impacting anything else.
And that's what we're working on right now, so when we do bring those concepts to the board again, it's strictly conceptual purposes for discussion and planning, not to say, okay, hey, this is where it would be. We're just wanting to show, if you were looking at a synthetic turf, because there was a number for that in the Dewey report, we're showing where it could be on the site, so if we make parking decisions in 2020 in any of these locations, we're not otherwise gonna be limiting where you could add a turf, or where you could add another athletic field or a baseball field. So that's why we asked him to show that. Yeah, right.
That was the ground we wanted to cover tonight on
Yes.
potential parking. So as Garrett mentioned, so we need to dig in a little bit further, and that'll come as part of the long-term plan as well as some of the circulation parking issues at the other campuses. Those will be separate kind of one-off drawings that'll show recommendations similar to conceptually how we're here as well.
And we did also talk with the administration about the availability of multimodal funds for those projects. The multimodal transportation fund, we know, is going to be available until 2023. We have used those dollars to address transportation safety improvements and pedestrian safety improvements at public schools. It is a good fund. It's roughly 70% of project costs that you can apply for. That includes soft costs and construction, so that's nice. It's twice a year through the DCED and PennDOT that you can apply for those monies. November 8th, I think, is the cutoff for PennDOT this year, and every year it's July 31st for DCED awarding in November. So if this was something we wanted to pursue in 2021, we would need to submit an application by July 31st for those monies, and then we would receive them November for the following construction cycle.
Are you the ones that would do that?
Yeah, we can definitely help you put that application together or do that. We've done several of those at this point. But yeah, and we've had, roughly $800,000 worth of just one project through that fund, so it is achievable. But we do have to target them to pedestrian safety improvements, so we have to show how we're improving traffic flow, pedestrian crosswalks, anywhere that you have students walking to school. They particularly like those projects because you can show that you're improving bike safety, walkability, all those things to and from the site, which is encouraging multiple forms of transportation, which is what they're looking for. So just keep that in mind as we go forward with these projects, that there's substantial dollars for them. Otherwise, questions yet?
I'm just gonna throw something else, another wild card into this. So the tennis courts, I know there are large cracks in the tennis courts. Is that something to potential look at converting that to parking and moving that elsewhere? And that space is relatively close and centered.
And it's at the same elevation as this parking area right here, basically, right? So you could easily take the fence down, come across. I think my first reaction would be, we want to get a good look at what's happening with that pavement subbase that's causing the cracking. Because if it's something, it's not experiencing any loading now. I think the short answer is, you got a big flat space that's pretty central, and if we can find another location for tennis, that makes a lot of sense. As I think about where tennis wants to stay on this campus.
And you could tennis and baseball, both of those.
Just wanted to throw that out there. I know that's something to look at eventually, if you haven't seen it yet, but there's substantial cracking there, and it's within the vicinity where you're looking at parking now.
It is on proximity here, so.
Yeah.
Because that's what she was here.
Okay, any other questions on the presentation?
Thank you.
Clarifying information,
No, it's
2020 projects. We're okay that way.
And then just to kind of highlight, when you had talked about the list of this list right here, since since this would be, since you're bidding this out through the PISA project, we don't have